Good morning everyone and welcome to this episode of Ford F-150 Life. Just kidding.
No, it's not.
Kind of seems that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So today, as you can guess, we have an F-150. Not only an F-150, I know, we have a Raptor. We have the older 6.2 liter monster. Yeah, look at that. Brrr. I don't know. You talk to these Raptor guys, this one, the new one, either way, let's take a look on the inside and show you what we're gonna be dealing with. So inside this beast we have the older door panel. This is gonna have a 5x7. We're gonna be taking that out to put in a 6.5. We got some tweeters mounted up here in the A-pillar. And we got this guy right here. This touch screen that's old. And then we have Fernando over here taking measurements on the seat so that when we're done we can put it back to where it was and we can do the tune. It's the radio right here that is the interesting part. The rest of it is just gonna be a stereo. This is the old radio that this came with, meaning it doesn't have CarPlay, it doesn't have Android Auto. A lot of people didn't like this. This is Ford's early version of their cool all-integrated funness. Unfortunately, this truck is too old for the MTF1 to work with. I talked to iData. They're actually working on a kit for this. It's nowhere near beta yet, so we're not able to get like a pre-release version of it, but the software is up and available, meaning if you have this, you can flash it, you can do all the stuff that the MTF1 kit gets, meaning retain your knobs and all that good stuff. You just got to make your own brackets. Okay, that works for me. First on the list is going to be taking this out and putting a new Kenwood in to replace it. We're also going to be putting in some Rockford Power Series T26252S, 6.5 components. We're going to go with the Power T1 coaxials for the rear. We have two amplifiers we're going to be using. We're going to be using his T404 and we're going to be using a 750.1. We're going to be tuning two P310s in a big box up underneath the seat. Those are full size, they're not shallow mount. He wanted a ton of bass. And the reason he wanted a ton of bass is because right now he has that. And that's not doing it for him. He wants some real power. We didn't install this, and that's part of the fun. This would make for a good 911 video if all we were, but there's not enough content here. Let me show you why. See this? This right here? This is funny, hold on. Look at that. So we got some CCA wire right here. Awesome. They didn't even take the tag off of it. That's pretty cool. Off of the subwoofer box. And there we go. Right in the middle of the floor. Right there. We have the JL amplifier.
But this is magic. You see it? You don't see it. You see it? You don't see it.
It's not mounted straight. I'm hoping the screws are just screwed into the carpet, but there you go. I mean, the seat folds down, and that's small enough it would probably fit underneath one of these seats. But that's what they chose. Joy. That we will not be retaining. He's gonna save that for another car that he has that we'll probably do at a later date, along with that woofer. So no, you can't have them as much as you want them. And it's good stuff too, but just a crappy install. So the list of things we have to do is all set and ready to go. We're going to start getting the car apart. I gotta get that radio out, and we have to figure out how we're going to get our new Kenwood DMX 706S into the dash. Sounds like fun, right Fernando?
So much fun.
Let's get started. This Raptor, being a premium Ford truck, comes with the premium sound system, which is the Sony. They put the amplifiers underneath the center console. You can see now why they moved them to behind the seat, because in order to get to it, we have to remove this whole center console to have access to it. It's a pain in the butt. Let's get started. Remove the center switch and cup holder by just lifting up on it. I'm plugging these switches here towards the front. There's two side brackets located here and here. Those need to come off. There's a clip at the front and then a couple clips at the back, so it locks in like this. So start here at the back side of it to pull that off. You're gonna need, okay, they didn't put the screws back in mine. You have a screw right there? Nope. Well, normally there's two screws here on the side and side that you're gonna have to remove, but they're not here. But there are still the two screws here in the front of the dash. Those are 8mm. In the back, there's also two screws. So you have to slide the seats all the way forward to get to those. you have to remove the gear shifter. As you can see, this is why this was a bad idea. There's 4 8mm bolts that hold this in place. Then the linkage comes up into here. It clips into this. There's a little tiny push pin right here that you push in to slide this up, but you have to unclip it from the actual shifter here first, and then you can remove it. And of course, there's a plug. Once you've done that, this will slide forward, and you can come over here into the side passenger, and there's 2 big gray plugs that you have to unplug. Then you just pull the whole unit back towards the back of the car, and that reveals the Ark of the Covenant, or in this case, the factory Sony amplifier that has a bunch of cut wires on it. As you can see, they tried to tap in here with no success. For some reason, they've removed it. I don't know why. Kind of is interesting. Here are those 2 big gray plugs. This is the linkage. It just snaps into place. This is the little clip that you push in, and then this slides up. Because this is a truck with a Sony system, that means we're gonna have plugs for this from iData. The A, standing for amplifier, FO2, is what you'd be using if you were retaining that factory radio and integrating it into the Sony system. We're not, of course, we're putting the new Kenwood in. We could still use a harness with all the speaker wires to plug into that factory harness that Fernando's repairing now. We'll plug that in and bring it out right in this area here and get this center console put back in. Now the bummer part of all of this is a lot of room that's being wasted here. We could almost fit the 2 Rockford amplifiers into this spot. Well, at least the crossovers. However, I don't want to use this area because you saw how difficult it was to get to it. I would hate to have to remove this every time I need to service it, just like Ford finally figured out. Plug the speaker plug in. We don't need the power or signal. This will reach up here to the front. Perfect. Insulate the harness so that we don't have to worry about it rubbing on any of this metal in the dash. Set it in place. We want to get all our connectors connected back up, but we don't want to push it all the way forward. To remove these 2 silver pieces here successfully, this clips into them. So we'll just hook everything up, and then we'll wait to screw it back into place until we're done with the radio. That'll make getting this in and out a little easier because I think we're gonna have to do a little bit of test fitting. Let's get this radio out. To do that, we have to remove the shroud here that's in front of the gauge cluster and the airbag here. To do that, use a right angle bit holder with a 7mm. There's 2 up there. To get this out, drop the glove box down, and there's screws up top. Well, I love it when people only have like 1 piece of paper in their glove box instead of their whole life. There's 3 8mm screws holding the airbag in place. Thank you. For the airbag, all you want to do is pull it out enough to get to the 7mm screw that's behind this side here, just like on that side over there. Up here in the top, there's this little piece of plastic, little rubber piece. Remove that, and there's 2 7mm up there. Remove the bottom beauty panel, and then you have to remove the sync panel. That's the panel with the aux and the USB. There's gonna be little clips that hold that in place. Be careful removing this because they're little tiny crappy clips. So if you can reach from behind and just kind of push, you'll be better off. Unplug it. And in this case, this one's glued back together. Oh, that's cool. All right, yeah, someone actually already had this apart and glued it back together. Anyways, there's a 7mm screw behind that. On the back, it has a couple plugs, one here at the top, one on the bottom, and of course the cigarette lighter. Remove those. The Ford unit is a 2-piece unit. You have the CD player main unit located here on the bottom, and you have the big screen located here on the top. Our radio is going to go up here where the screen is, but we need to pull both units. To get it out, there's just a bunch of 7mm screws, except for over here where apparently someone lost one and put a torque screw in. Start from the top because they're overlapping panels. Okay, hey, more cut wiring. Okay. Now the last piece you want to pull out is this top cover here where the center channel speaker is. This is where the brain for the sync will be. There's 2 7mm screws towards the windshield. Once you have everything out of the dash, you'll notice up here, this is the factory USB cable. We're gonna need to gain access to that so that we can retain the factory USB point here. This is our starting point. Now that we have all this out, we can figure out how we're going to get our radio up here into this top panel. With using the MTF1 kit and the other versions of the F-150, they take the brackets off of the factory screen and use those to make a go-between to our aftermarket radio. I'm thinking we're gonna steal their idea and do the same thing. But let's get over to the bench and take a look and see what we have. We're gonna be using the Maestro RR, obviously. We'll be using the F01 harness. We need to flash this guy first. Inside the box is a USB adapter. Plug in our unit, select flash by vehicle, select the year, in this case it's 2011. Ford F-150, factory navigation, check our steering wheel, select your brand, type in the model number. Next it's going to ask you for the serial number. The serial number is located here on the box, this little guy over there. Once you've entered that, it'll ask you what firmware you want to use. It'll list the parts that you could possibly need. Select the things that you have that you want to retain. We're not going to do radar, we're not retaining the factory amp, we don't need sync, but we do want stereo controls. Select flash, and then wait for it to flash. The unit's flashed. I'm gonna just wire up the harness real quick and get it into the car and just test everything to make sure it works, and then we'll bring it back to the bench and make it pretty. But for now, we just need to make sure everything does it the way it's supposed to. In the F01 kit, we have the 3 main harnesses for the car, and we have the OBD2 interface plug. What we need to get to is the red, yellow, and black. That's our power ground and accessory. We also need the RR harness, 4-pin red, black, white, and blue connector. This is our data connection. And then we need a 3-pin black, white, red to 1/8 inch connection. We've twisted the wire together and just put some tape on them for now. Let's get this into the car. When you plug the unit in, it's gonna ask you to do a setup process, and that involves turning the ignition key on and turning the ignition key off. If you've never plugged in a Maestro before, plug into the radio, plug into the car, and then plug in the Maestro module. Turn the car on, and it'll say, do you wanna set up for your car? This is only on Fords, so if you're doing another car, it isn't gonna matter. If anything ever happened where it needs to be reset, you're gonna follow the same procedure. We've done that. We've got our control panel plugged back in, we've got the car turned on, and what we found is on the factory it has a climate button. When you press it, it takes you to climate controls on the radio. If you hit them again, it'll go away. If you hit map, it'll automatically take you over to CarPlay. If you're on music and you hit phone, it'll take you to your phone. You have volume control, so your volume control button still works. Right now, this is not a fully realized feature set. Once it becomes an actual dash kit from them, we'll be able to go in and program these buttons to do whatever we want. Right now, they're just what I'd like to call back-end programs, meaning they knew they could do something and they just programmed them to what they thought it might be. If you have Sirius XM and you hit radio, it'll switch to the Sirius XM from the FM tuner. Media on here doesn't do anything, but on the steering wheel works normal. You also can do seek from the seek buttons here, but the tuner knob doesn't do anything yet. But the buttons that really matter all function the way they're supposed to. I feel volume, climate, phone, those are the things that you're gonna be using the most, and those work. You could still use all the buttons down on the bottom here to do the air conditioning, so if you wanna shut it off, you just tap that and it'll do it as well. Pretty excited about this. This is pretty cool. The one thing that we're gonna have to figure out also is the backup camera retention. Right now there's no harness to do that, so we're going to have to figure that out. Yay. But this is a big hurdle. At least we know we're at this point and we start building our dash panel to mount this thing in place. Now that the radio's out, we're gonna move on to getting the rest of the car apart, pulling the side panels off, and getting that amplifier out. First thing you wanna do is disconnect the amplifier from the battery. Looking at what they did the zip tie onto the handle of the battery, which will make servicing this wonderful. I'm not a big fan of this style fuse holder, mainly because this top will pop off. It's a good idea to use zip ties to hold it in place. The only bad thing is what they've used them to mount the fuse holder to this bracket. The guy comes to change the battery, he's gonna cut these two. The fuse holder is then gonna just flop around. This top is gonna fall off, and these bolts will more than likely tap into the car somewhere, like this nice big ground bolt right here, and then pow, bang, whiz, snap. If it hits on this one, you're golden. If it hits on this one, well, it's gonna burn that whole wire going to the battery. So if you are gonna be using these style fuse holders that where the top pops off, make sure it's firmly mounted somewhere other than here.
Now that we're done with the radio, I'm going to move to the speakers. The first thing we're gonna do is find the screws. This is a 6mm in the bottom. I don't remember if it's actually the factory. It looks like the speaker, but you grab a pick tool. And then in the handle also, carefully just pry it out. and that's 2 8mm. Then from there you just pull it up. This one has 2 clips, so you don't have to take the whole cable out. In the corner, you just push it down. Your switchers, pry it from the bottom. It's easy to take it out like that.
The factory speaker is the 5x7, this football shaped thing. It's smaller than a 6x9, and the idea is that it's going to give you a little bit more bass than a 6.5 because you're getting a little bit more cone area. A lot of people ask, can I put a 6x9 in this location? And the answer is the new one, yes, the old one, no. And the main reason for that is the depth of the speaker. It's not that deep. It's at the same depth as a standard 6.5. And as you can see here, you know, using my finger, we don't have a lot of room. We have a little bit more if we go to the glass, but not a lot of room. Even if you cut this, fitting that 6x9 in, it's gonna be tough. For us in this install, we're gonna be using the T2 6.5. We're gonna have to make a bracket that takes us from that 5x7 up to this much bigger 6.5. It's wider than the 5x7 because it's 5x7. The depth on this is about the same as the 5x7. We should be good there. The other thing to think about too is coming out of the door. This looks like about 5/8 of an inch before it gets to this piece of foam. We can't come out of the door all that much, and that's the other reason why going to a 6x9 is hard to do. One other thing that we run into on these is the back side of the door. When you mount that 6.5 in, you want to pop this grill off and make sure that this hole is open enough for that 6.5. You may have to come in here and cut a little bit of this for the new speaker. To make our adapters, we're going to take both speakers and we're going to scan them into the computer. And then the plan is to take both pictures and lay them on top of one another and make the shape that mimics this with this in the background. So once we've loaded them into the computer, we'll launch our software and start the process of making all that work. Once all that work is done, press the button and it'll take off and do its thing. Let's take it over to the bench and see how she looks. Finished product. Drop our speaker into place. All our screw holes line up. It fits nice and tight in the back. Good size, everything's nice. We can take it over the door and make sure it fits on the door and all the screw holes line up. Here, fit that on there for me. Got screw holes? Mm-hmm. All right. Now cut this again in acrylic, and then we'll take it over and we'll cut it out of 1/2 inch. The reason why we want to do it out of 1/2 inch is we want to be able to countersink these factory screw holes here in. That way we have a flat surface for this to attach our speaker to. 1/8" piece of acrylic is set and cut. We have 2 pieces of 1/2" Centra. We're going to transfer this onto here using our spiral cut router bit. The first thing we need to do is use some template tape, which is double-sided tape that we get from Mobile Solutions. Put them onto both pieces. To start with cutting out the big hole in the center first. Drill a 1/2" hole through this so the router bit can easily pass through. I don't want to pull this off yet because I need to use these to drill my holes. I'm going to take it over to the workbench, fill in all these holes, and get this bracket over to Fernando so he can finish the install.
Now that we have the speaker adapter done, we're going to go and screw it in. For the testing purposes of the speaker, we're gonna remove the handle so we don't have to go back and forth, put it back in. We're gonna grab the door panel and test fit it. Alright, so you can see right now, the speaker is actually hitting the door panel. What I wanna cut is this part right here, and the bottom side. Now we have a clear speaker, nothing is hitting. Let's go back and put everything back together. Alright, this door is done. Let's go move to another one.
Now onto the backup camera real quick. When we took the radio out of the dash, we saw the cut wires there and that strange blue wire. Fernando's just done some investigation because he's over here working with the speaker. And we found this silver thing right here, which is connected to a module that looks like a backup camera. Further investigation, we found this guy right here. This is the backup camera. Apparently the factory one died and they replaced it with an aftermarket. We have a bundle right here that's all zip tied up. That means we're not going to be integrating into the factory backup camera. We'll simply be plugging in an aftermarket backup camera, which makes things surprisingly easier for us. Fernando called me over. We've got the amplifier out. He wanted to show me this though. So here's your Tessa tape. They covered all of about 3 inches of Tessa tape. So you saw it when it was in there and you're like, oh, well, maybe there is some redeeming value in it. Nope, why even bother? And this, of course, is CCA, which is fine for this amplifier. I'm not gonna say it's not. This is something else we're having to kind of deal with. They have these illuminated entryway and it's pretty bad. He's trying to clean that up as much as possible. One of the things you guys asked us to do a video on that we haven't done, and I'm sorry, is grounding an amplifier. After seeing this, I really need to put some effort into getting it done. Check this out. What in the... They scratched the paint with a screwdriver, which is cool. I mean, it's at least... No, it's not. Is there a ring terminal?
It has a ring terminal to lug washers, but it's just...
That's sexy. Yeah, go ahead, let's pull it apart. So what is that screw doing? Oh, wait, is that even touching, like...
It's not touching nothing.
That's not touching anything. Why was that even there?
Oh, this one, they just kind of like that. That's it.
I wonder if one screw was stripped maybe, and either way, it didn't work out too well for them. When we run into a situation like this, what we like to do is just kind of clean the area up, and then we put some roadkill on the top, and if we can, also we'll put it on the bottom to prevent any more rusting from happening. And then of course, we'll make our own ground where it needs to be. Quite a mess when you're designing something. I'm gonna clean some of this off before I get to this. I just had to find this. It got buried over there. Whew. Looking at all our pieces laid out, the radio comes with this bracket right here. This bracket is big enough to fill the hole behind the unit here, similar to the bracket that comes with the MTF1 kit. So with that mounted in place, this will sit there and look very nice. What we have to figure out is how to screw it into place. It does come with this cage, but it's kind of shallow. Obviously not the size that we have. So there's a couple things going on here that I'm thinking about. I'm just trying to put all the pieces together how I want to do them right now. So after taking a bunch of measurements off of the screen and the radio themselves, because the way this mounts in the dash is the screen screws into the radio like this, and there's a screw that goes here, and that screw, there's nothing behind it, so this actually has to be this length, not this length. So I had to add those all together, and after playing around a little bit, we ended up with this guy here. What this does is this mimics the top screen where this is, which brought us into another problem. If you'll notice, see how this comes out and up? The reason why it does that is there's part of the dash there that once we get inside I'll show you, which posed a small problem. We're gonna do a little bit of trimming. But this is the mock-up made out of wood. Now I did run into a few problems. I measured off of the radio holes here and not the screen holes, so I had these wrong. So I actually had to move them out a little bit, which on the final product I've already taken care of that in the software. So for these I just dremeled out a little bit. But let's head into the car and I'll show you how this goes in. The first piece that I had to take off was this top bracket right here. There's two screws here and here that get in the way of where the radio goes. The factory, that's what that bent piece was, it actually brings the radio out and up. Well, ours is solid, so it won't be able to do that. So we unscrew this. Now this will be able to go back in. We will have to remove these two screw down points. There'll be plenty to hold it in place. It's not gonna be an issue for us. Once that came out, we had to trim the dash up and across here and remove that lower portion, which got us level with this piece of metal right here, which is gonna allow the radio to slide into place. This attaches using these 4 factory screw holes, lines up, and then this sits over the top of it just like this, and that's it. It's all done. We don't have to remove this metal bracket because it's a short chassis, but a deep chassis radio would go in here with no issues. I did pull these out because I needed some way to reach up in there and tilt the radio back and forth because I needed to know how long to make the arms that come out. As far as cutting goes, this was the only piece that had to go. This is just the wood mock-up to make sure everything fits nice and looks sexy in the dash. It does. Next, we'll cut it out of 1/8 inch acrylic. We'll glue it all together. Boom, done. Spray paint it black, maybe. I don't know. While that's happening, because the laser will be doing its thing, I'm gonna start getting the harness all set and figuring out what pieces I need and don't need from that. Harness. A lot of this we're not gonna need, so we're gonna remove it. Let's pull off our Kenwood part first. I like to just start by removing all the tape. And the big bundle in the middle is as good a place as any. Now for Fords, they have this red piece inside here that locks the wiring in place. If you're gonna depin it, just push up through the side, it unlocks it, and it'll fall right out. On this harness, we're not gonna be retaining this aux because it is not wired that way. Plus he has an iPhone, so there's no reason to leave these wires in here. This pink with a red stripe, bundle of wire here. This is for secondary phone controls on the steering wheel, so like push to talk and answer and hang up. If the car has an external module for that, you have to run this over to the module. Our radio doesn't, it's all one piece, so we can remove this. This is the amplified system. None of these speaker wires are going to be used. This also does not have the plug for the factory subwoofer in the car. We'll remove that. I'm gonna hop in the car real quick and see if any of these other wires need to be removed. The wires that I did cut off the little pigtails from, I'll unpin them and slide over some heat shrink and replace that. Now that the harness is cleaned up, all the unnecessary wiring is out of it, we'll start by taping our wiring. And how I like to do that is I like to go from the plug side of the brain, meaning the RR, what plugs into that, I work from that out into the center. What that'll give me is that'll just give me a nice uniform bundle of wires. When we dress up our wiring harnesses, we use exterior Tessa tape as opposed to interior Tessa tape. It just holds up a little better. All of it is gonna get sticky and messy over time. And that's what we end up with now. These, of course, are the iData communication wires, iData brain, harnesses that plug in, and then we just have a few wires that are gonna hook up to the radio. We have the remote turn on, always hook that up. I don't care if it's an amplified system or not, always hook it up. The red accessory, purple, white, reverse, yellow, constant 12 volts, black, ground, orange, illumination, and the pink is the VSS wire. He doesn't need it for this radio, but I always leave it here. We'll cap it off, and if we ever decide to go with something that has wireless CarPlay or wireless Android Auto and it requires the VSS wire, which most of them don't now, but if it does, we'll have it here to get at. On our Kenwood harness, we got a couple wires here that we're not going to be using, and we'll cap those off as well. All 8 of our speaker wires will not be getting used. The brown wire cell phone mute will not be getting used, and the blue-yellow steering wheel control input will not be getting used. It is getting steering wheel controls, but they're done over the data wires for the RR and not through these wires. I'm gonna cap all these off. I'll make my attachments here. I'm also gonna leave a pigtail for power and ground for the backup camera, as well as the remote turn on output that's gonna run down to where we had the amplifier harness in that passenger footwell. Now, if you're not going to be using your speaker wires like we're not, make sure you cap them off individually. A lot of people just like to take some tape, curl them all up into a ball. Don't do that. Set yourself up for success. If anything happens to those wires and they touch each other, you're going to get an amp warning on the radio and you're going to lose all sound. Now that I have my harness all soldered up, there's one last thing I have to do. On the back of the radio for this particular model, Kenwood has the purple-white reverse trigger input. It's kind of short, so I like to add another couple inches onto it. Add a little bit of flexible tubing. We'll add our bullet style connector onto it with a little bit of purple heat shrink so that we know what it's for. Our kit has had time to dry up. This is the acrylic version of it. The paper's still on the back side. Just cracked. So we had made this out of 1/8 inch acrylic. Honestly, the wood did a much better job. We're going to go back to the drawing board, and now we're going to make it out of 1/4 inch acrylic and see how that holds up. Oh well, live and learn. All right, second attempt. Now we have 1/4 inch acrylic, a lot thicker. Let's go test fit it in the car and make sure that everything works now that we've put the thicker plastic on. I did do the math to shrink this down. Let's make sure I got it right. That's it. All nice and in place. I just have to put all the switches back in. Not bad, not bad. What do you think?
It's awesome.
There you go. Fernando says it's awesome. Now that the radio is squared away, the next thing that we're going to tackle in the dash is these crossovers. We want to put them in here in this area where the factory radio would have been, because we have the room. You guys are kind of big. We're not going to be able to set them like this. We can go all the way back. We do have quite a bit of room. My original thought was to make a mount and then stack them on top of each other like this, but do it in a way so that the wiring goes out the side like that. What I'm looking at is having them sit like this in the dash here, and then we'll make it so that they'll screw into these factory brackets. You can pull it in and out and get the wiring down in here into the corner. So what I need to do first is figure out how big this piece needs to be, and then from there I can kind of play around with it and figure out how I want to stack those. if I go 8.5 by 7.5, that'll get me an L, and then I'll put a piece across the front. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go cut a piece of plastic. Flushed in some screws here in the front, ground off the back so they're not sticking in and they're not gonna hurt you. First crossover, I'm gonna mount up here towards the front, and the second crossover I want to sit just like this on top. So we have this nice stacked look. It's about 1 5/8 up. So I've cut some 1/2 inch plastic, and if I mount it like this, the only screw that won't get put in is obviously this one here in the center, but that'll give us plenty of room to slide this in, have all our wiring zip tied down and into place so that it can come down and go into the bottom. To get this mocked up, this is the tape we're using. This is Tessa tape, just skinny red kind. The reason why we use the tape is so that obviously I don't have a third hand. I can now easily manipulate this while I'm drilling in my screws. Now Rockford puts this double-sided tape on the bottom of this, and even though I love using double-sided tape for things, I don't like this because it doesn't allow this to sit flat. That means it's gotta go. There we go. This will slide into place. 2 screws here will lock it down. Now that it's all assembled, let's do one final test. We've also added a 1/8 inch spacer here with a piece of Velcro on it. That way, when it goes in, it won't ever vibrate or rattle or cause any noises. And it'll sit just like that. Now that this is all built and ready to go, I'm gonna leave this wiring for Fernando. I'm gonna head into the back and start on the amplifier rack. Now Ford, in the newer F-150s, puts the amplifier right here, not in that god-awful, terrible spot in the center console. Apparently it's one of those cases where you live and learn. I'm sure their technicians were real happy every time that Sony amp would give them issues where they had to spend hours pulling that thing apart, servicing it, and putting it back together. Ugh, that would get old real quick. This seems like a much more reasonable place, and that's where we're gonna put our amplifiers. You okay, man? He's lost. Just use mine.
Yeah, probably. Oh, I got it.
This is shaped a little bit different than the newer F-150s, but it's close enough to that's really all that matters. On the newer F-150s, this is kind of sunk in, and this actually is open here on this. The metal still goes here, so we'll notch it here like we normally do, and we'll make a panel that covers this whole area so we can mount the 2 amplifiers, the distribution block, and still retain our vents here. Our wires need to come out this area here. We'll probably notch this so that our power wires will tuck this way. This is the power wire here. Normally we don't run it before we start on this. However, because it's going into a power distribution block, we do that sometimes to save time if Fernando's leapfrog ahead of where I'm at. All the signal wire is going to go this way into the dash. For power distribution, we are going to be using the Stinger SHD 820. It is a 2-hole fuse holder, and then this truck is actually made out of steel. It's not aluminum. This is before they changed them, so we can just ground it in the back like we normally would. The first step when making an amp rack, of course, is to grab a tape measure, take some measurements, figure out how big your piece of plastic needs to be, and go from there. Let's take a look at the amplifiers because we need to get a good size on what they are and kind of get a general layout first. The first amp we want to take a look at is the T750.1. This is going to be the sub amp. It's this cute little guy right here. Now these have distortion detectors built into them. They come with a disc that has your test tones on it. That's these little lights right here in the top. It has an input RCA. And then they all come with a Power Cube burn-in sheet. This one's spec'd in at 1,050 watts. It's incredible something this small can do that. In the box is also the instructions that explains to you how to use the disc in order to set up your distortion detector. It has a clip indicator and the output distortion detector built into it. For the highs, we're going to be using this guy here, which is the 404. This was his amplifier. The nice thing about these, they're the same size for the most part. This makes me happy. It makes installation pretty nice. On the amplifiers, they have a power plug that is removable, as well as on the 4-channel, it has speaker plugs here and input plugs here. The other thing we'll be adding too is the PLC2 subwoofer level control for the 750.1. That's going to plug into the same side as the amplifier as where your input RCAs go. This is what's going to be going in the rear of the car. It doesn't take up a ton of room. It needs to be about this much wider, so we have room for the plugs that have the RCAs on them to connect into the amplifier. And then we want to make sure this is far enough away from here so we can route the speaker wires down and the power wires up and into the amplifiers. If I have room, something like with the fuse holder low comes in like this, or possibly sit like this and come over. There's a lot of options. What I need to do now is, like I said, just get into the car and measure and cut some plastic. We have 20 inches. I think I might go vertical with these things. We have to put the fuse holder. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go vertical. 13 by 20. We have a piece of plastic that's 13 by 20. Now we just need to mark the areas that need to be removed. The first one up is the corner here where this seat goes. We'll just leave this little area here and we'll cut this. And this is where we'll screw it into. We don't really need to remove this part here, but we're going to, just because it'll make this easier to screw in. We'll put a little S-bend in here to bring it closer because this is sticking out a little bit. Panel's cut. This stuff is a pain to cut. Fresh blade, great idea. This is a nutsert. A nutsert is like a rivet. Put it into the hole, you have a tool that crushes it, and it makes this a place that you can screw in, screw out, screw in, screw out as many times as you want. It screws onto your tool. Put it in the hole, squeeze it, and then unscrew it back out. They make several different versions of these depending on how you need to do it, because like this is pretty big. They make some that squeeze, and then they have pneumatic, and then they have ones that attach to the drills. Either way, these are awesome tools. They give it a really nice finished look. We can put our screw in there, and that'll hold this all in place. The one last thing I need to do is down here on the bottom, there's a channel where I want the power wire to go through. So I just need to mark that. We'll cut that, but this panel is all set. Over to the bench we go.
For the fuse holder, we make an L bracket, ABS, 1/4 inch. This gonna mount in the battery holder. We're gonna screw it in, 2 screws. This one is gonna be right in the edge. Our power wire is gonna come from the inside of this plastic. Hold it right there. We have to leave this space so they can check the oil. If we put it next to the corner, that's gonna be an issue.
This is the Fox box. You have tons of depth in the bottom of it. They use an ABS mount, which we'll show you more of once we get it flipped over and put into the truck, but they use every available inch of space, and it's ported. So this is actually the floor. That's why we recommend grills. So because this is gonna sit on the floor and you don't want any damage to happen to the woofer, like crayons or something like that gets put up underneath it. We are using the P3s. This is an aluminum cone too, which is another reason why I strongly recommend grills.
Regular boofer.
Yeah, look at that. It's a monster. Drops right in, no problems. Piece of cake. So this is the top. I'm gonna put both the amps here. I wanna make sure I have enough room here for the signal wire will come across the top, down, and over this way. Power wire is gonna come down, up, and then this is that notch I was talking about, so this will come up and go into here. We just need to keep this up high enough because there's like a 1/2 inch gap here where the carpet is that this tongues into. So that'll just do an S bend here. The grounds will follow through that as well. But this is it. I just need to start getting stuff on the board. So a quick break from the time lapse of me wiring up the amplifier. Fernando just informed me he finished wiring up my crossover mount. Let's take a look. This is it here. As I said, we wanted it long enough to where we can remove it and service it if we need to. It slides back into place. Put the 2 screws in. And now what he's got to do is he's going to solder these groups of wires together here. We like to use blue with color, so in this case, like white with blue and gray with blue as the tweeters, and then the white black will be mid, and then the 16 gauge will be the input. He'll get knocking this out. Continue on, sir. But that looks pretty. Good job. Back to the time lapse. And we're done. What we got going on is our main power is going to come in here that's already in the car. We have our 2 ground wires and our subwoofer level control is right here. They all going to go through that slit we were talking about. Our signal is this way, along with our speaker wires are all going off to this side of the car. Our sub wires will be following them as well. The last thing we need to do before we put it into the car though is go ahead and adjust our gains and crossovers here. We want to turn all our gains all the way down, and we want to set our crossovers to what looks like 80 Hertz. On the 4-channel amp, there is a 2-channel 4-channel switch. 2-channel is default. Make sure you switch that to 4-channel. For the crossovers on the 4-channel, it comes in AP, which is all pass. Make sure you switch it to HP, which is high pass. We just like to do these so that once we get it into the car, the gains are all the way down. We have some form of a crossover on there. We're gonna tweak them more once they're in. This just gives us a stopgap in case something bad happens. Along with the power wire down the driver's side of the car, we're also going to ground it on this side of the car. We talked about grounding it earlier, and they had it grounded somewhere in this area. Our ground is going to go right here in this spot. When grounding our amplifiers, we use this kit here, positiveground.com, and it's a multi-step grounding kit. And how it works is it has this drill bit here first, and if you'll notice, it's stepped. This is going to be the first hole you drill. Then you have the brush, which has this pin in the middle. That's why this has a step. Once the hole is drilled, this will line up with that, and you'll get a nice round area removed. Then you have the socket, which will go into your drill. You have, so it's self-threading and will lock into place. There's a star washer, so the star washer will go on first, then your ring terminal, tighten this thing down. And then if you can, lastly, you can go up behind it and put the bolt on to make it to where it'll never come off. Always before drilling a hole, make sure there's nothing behind it. And there you have it. A nice solid ground point. And that finishes the amplifier mount. Now for those of you that are new to the channel and you wonder why we wired up on the bench, instead of just like a lot of people do, they run all the wires into the back here, and then they spend hours cramped up in this small space wiring up the amplifier. For one, it's sitting in the car for hours wiring up the amplifier. Two, you'll never get this look in the install. You know, your wires will never be this tighty because you'll always have to keep pulling and stretching. And it's much quicker to wire it up on the bench and then bring it into the car. I don't have to sit in the car. It reduces the chance to like bend a seat or scuff a panel or something like that. All we have to do is screw it into place. Signal goes that way, power goes that way, and we're done. We don't have to sit back here for hours. Try it. You might like it. Right, Fernando?
Correct. I'm about to start on the bass knob, and the problem I ran into is the JL bass knob is smaller than the Rockford. Also, the Rockford bass knob, it's deeper. They used to have in this location right here. The problem is I have a metal bar in the back. Rockford actually hits the metal bar, and we're not gonna able to install it in the same place. The other option is going in this part right here from the dash. It's actually nothing in the back. We're gonna make a new hole in here and put it in there, and we're gonna come out with something so we don't have a big hole in there.
Now that I have the amplifier in, Fernando has connected the power wire up. We left that disconnected until I had it powered into the distribution block. He did a great job on that. He also finished up all the wiring for the crossovers. Those are in and done, and all our connections are made here. This is our speed wire coming in here and attaching to the factory amplifier plug, and then our wires coming down, attaching attaching into that. So all those connections were made right here. Coming up into the dash is our RCAs, our remote turn on, and he is just finishing up the bass knob, where he put it right here. That has to stay out for right now until we get this put in, and then all the pieces will go in. So the radio goes in first and just kind of stacks out there. Almost in the home stretch. The last thing we have to do getting everything finalized, like all the length and all the wires that need to be zip tied together. And then the last thing is to get the factory USB down here where the radio is. It just unplugs from up top here, and then there's one clip on this side that you just have to remove. And that'll free it up enough for you to pull it down into the dash here. And then we're gonna use the USB GM1, plug into it, and that'll convert it over from mini USB to standard USB. What I like to do at this point is put some shrink wrap over this connection so it doesn't fall apart. Doing a quick head check to make sure that we have all our parts. It's time to start plugging in the radio. When you're plugging in a Kenwood, make sure you read where the camera goes, because they just give you a yellow input. And on this particular model, there's 4 yellow inputs. Well, one is actually an output. Make sure you get the rear camera. The other thing to keep in mind when doing an RR harness, the aux looking connector, there is an iData input for that. Don't accidentally plug it into, let's say, the mic input or the audio out input. And the same is true for the mic. Make sure you plug it into the thing that says mic, and don't be afraid to unplug things and move them around if they're not in an order you like. Lastly is the RCAs. Kenwood goes rear at the top, front, then sub. They're a little bit different than everyone else. Line the kit up, make sure it's exactly where you want it. Trim these 2 screw locations off here because we remove those when we cut in for the dash. All right, those screw holes are gone. What we need to do now is, before we put it all back together, we want to test it. There's a lot that has to come apart in order for this to, you know, function the way we want it to. Let's test it. The first thing you want to check is balance and fader and make sure it does the cross. Perfect there. What's the weather like today?
It's currently clear and 62 degrees in Clearwater.
Now we're going to move on to actually doing some audio testing. We want to test for polarity to make sure all the speakers are moving the polarity we want them to move. For that, we'll use our polarity checker, and we're using the Sheffield Labs My Disc. It has a polarity pulse that it creates for us, which is this popping sound. And that's going to move the speaker in a defined direction that this will read. And that's it. All the speakers are moving the direction we want. Now we want to move on to setting the gains on the amplifier. As we said, these amplifiers have distortion detectors and clip indicators built into them. First thing we would normally do is play a 0 dB track and see where this clips out at. But it's a Kenwood, and you can play them all the way up. They don't ever distort out of the outputs, which is nice. So we'll move right on to playing a -5 dB track, both 40 Hertz and 1000 Hertz, from our phone, because this does not have a CD player. I've downloaded the discs onto my computer at home, dropped them onto a Dropbox account, and I can access the Dropbox playlist from here, and that's how I do it. For you guys that are wondering, like thumb drive or whatever, Dropbox. When doing a test like this, because you're going to be playing a steady tone, make sure there are no speakers connected to the amplifier, and that includes all crossovers. Make sure there's no crossovers connected either. You can do just as much damage to the crossover as you can to the speaker. Now the nice thing about these amplifiers is that it's easy enough to unclip them, and that's what we're going to do. Make sure when unplugging these amplifiers that you unplug the right side. The plugs are basically identical. These are the inputs. The bottom next to the power is the outputs. The other thing you want to do is unplug the bass knob. According to the instructions, they do not want that connected right now. When you're turning the knob, blue right here is good. Red right here is bad. Now the light right above it is your clip light indicator. That's your input light. So if we were getting clipping, that's where it would happen. We'll turn this down till the blue light just barely comes on. play a negative 5 dB 40 hertz test track, and we'll adjust the sub amp. And it works the same way as you're turning it. Blue indicated here is good. Red indicated here bad. Got just starting to get a blue light, blue light. Our gains are set as far as how we want them to be set. We can always go down, but we definitely don't want to go up. Make sure at this point you turn your radio all the way down and or stop your track. Personally, I do both. Plug everything back in. Now that that's done, we can put the dash back together and move on to the actual audio portion of the tune, where we're going to work the EQ a little bit and then set some delays and crossover settings. When assembling this back together, do it in reverse order. Put the sides on first, then slide the center console back into place, then put your airbag and your gauge cluster shroud back on. Fox box is in. The port is on the passenger side. This is what the box looks like. It tucks up underneath the seat pretty well. If you fold the box up, this is those ABS panels I was talking about. They just ride into the carpet here. It's a good way to optimize the amount of space that you have in order to make room for those bigger magnets. Both speaker cups are here on the driver's side. But now that we have the box in, the dash is all back together, time to sit in the car and do a little tuning. Yay! Now for this one, it's a radio. It's not a big DSP or anything like that. The only thing we need is an iTest mic. We're gonna sit in the car, we're gonna play a little bit of music, and we're gonna have a little bit of fun and see how it sounds. We're seeing what's going on. We come up with a little bit of adjustment. We're limited on what we can do, so we can do an overall tune. We can't do individuals. Play pink noise, get to how it sounds good, make it a preset. And like that, this thing is done. We've been jamming on this thing for a good half hour. My ears are ringing. Naturally, right? Hey! And it's Mike. He's calling to check on his buddy's truck.
Everything work out all right?
Yeah, we were just wrapping up the video we shot on it. It turned out really nice.
What, the video or the install?
I'm assuming both, but we'll go with the install for
Let's
now.
hope so.
Very happy with what we got going on. It's nice, it's clean, it's crisp, it's fun. Those were the words that the customer wanted. He's like, I want something that I can just get in and beat the crap out of and just have a good time with. And we're like, yeah, we got you, bro.
Sounds loud, and now he has a chair massage with all the bass. Dude, it's a lot, yeah.
Being able to integrate that radio into the factory location was really cool. And that means this video is over. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Fernando.
Until the next one, guys.
And hopefully it won't be an F-150 or a Raptor. However,
maybe it's gonna be.
I'm pretty sure it's gonna be.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a great night as always. We'll catch you later next time.
Bye.